All right, let's jump right in. We're looking at one of the most volatile places on Earth, the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, what's known as the Durand Line. Now, this region has always been defined by deep, complicated ties, but what's happening right now is something else entirely. It's a flashpoint of escalating violence, deep political fractures, and a humanitarian crisis that's just getting worse.
And this quote, wow, it just cuts right to the heart of it. We're not just talking about some ongoing, low-level tension here. We're talking about a situation that is actively getting worse, spiraling. By the fall of 2025, a security crisis that was already bad had taken a significant turn for the worse, building on what had already been the deadliest month in years.
So, how did we get here? To really get a handle on what's going on, we've got to pull back and look at the big picture. And what you'll see is a region that is absolutely teetering on the brink thanks to a perfect storm of more and more violence and a total political breakdown. Okay, so here's what we're going to break down. First, the violence itself. It's just exploding, and the human cost is staggering. Then we'll look at the politics, which, honestly, is a mess, and it's paralyzing any real strategy. We'll also dive into the constant friction across that border. And finally, we'll see how all of this is just piling on to an already desperate humanitarian situation. First up, let's zoom in on what's happening inside Pakistan itself, specifically in its northwestern province, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or KP as it's known. This is a really rugged, tough part of the world, and right now it's pretty much ground zero in the country's fight against a new wave of militancy. And the attacks, they're relentless, and they're coming from all sides. You've got the TTP, that's the Pakistani Taliban, slamming a massive car bomb into a security headquarters. You've got political activists being gunned down in the street. And then there's this really heartbreaking story of an alleged airstrike hitting an arms depot, which led to a lot of civilians getting killed, including women and children. And the price being paid by the security forces? It's just brutal. Look at this number, 19. That's not a weekly total. That's 19 Pakistani soldiers gone in a single day fighting TTP militants near the border. It just shows you how incredibly intense this fight has become. So you can just imagine the fury in Islamabad. After a loss like that, Pakistan's prime minister basically threw down the gauntlet. He gave the Taliban government in Afghanistan a blunt ultimatum. This isn't diplomacy anymore. This is a line in the sand, plain and simple. But here's the kicker. While the federal government is talking tough, they've got a huge problem at home. They can't even agree on a strategy. The central government in Islamabad wants to go in hard, militarily. But the local government in KP, they're saying, no way, we need to talk directly with Afghanistan. This division is a massive roadblock, a recipe for paralysis. Okay, so that's the mess in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Now, let's shift our focus south to another massive province, Balochistan. This place has its own long, complicated history of conflict, but what's happening now is spilling onto the world stage and pulling in global powers.
And it started with a really high-stakes play at the United Nations. A diplomatic gamble that, well, completely backfired for Pakistan.
So here's what went down. Pakistan and its ally China tried to get the Balochistan Liberation Army, the BLA, officially labeled a terrorist group by the UN. But the big Western powers, the US, UK, and France, put up a roadblock. Their official reason? Not enough evidence linking the BLA to groups like Al-Qaeda. Now get this, the US already calls the BLA a terrorist group on its own. So what does that tell you? This is all about geopolitics, and it was a huge public setback for Pakistan. And while all that diplomatic drama was unfolding, something else was happening on the ground, something really alarming. Balochistan was quietly turning into the new world capital for opium.
So how did that happen? It's a classic case of unintended consequences. The Taliban banned poppy growing in Afghanistan back in 2022. So the whole industry, we're talking farmers, know-how, the entire supply chain, just picked up and moved a few miles across the border into Balochistan. And now you've got this massive drug trade that security experts say is pouring cash right into the pockets of the same militants Pakistan is fighting. It's a vicious cycle.
So while Pakistan is basically fighting fires on two fronts, what's happening on the other side of that border in Afghanistan? Well, the Taliban are doubling down. They're all about tightening their grip and forcing their strict ideology onto the entire country. You hear quotes like this one from the Taliban's powerful interior minister, talking about how building trust is essential. Sounds good, right? But let's look at their actions, not just their words. Because the reality is, well, it's the complete opposite. They shut down the internet nationwide to stop immoral behavior. They banned Afghani women from working with the UN, which cripples aid efforts.
They're ripping things like human rights and democracy out of school books. And they're cracking down hard on any independent media. This isn't about trust. This is about total control.
And then, disaster struck. A massive earthquake. Over 2,200 people dead. And this is where those policies had truly deadly consequences. Because they'd banned female aid workers, it became almost impossible to get help to women and children in the hardest-hit areas. Their ideology literally got in the way of saving lives.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. You've got chaos in Pakistan, a harsh crackdown in Afghanistan, and what you're left with is this incredibly strange, paradoxical relationship between the two countries. They are fighting and cooperating at the exact same time. And if you want to understand the conflict side of the equation, it really boils down to this one number, 8,000. That's how many TTP militants Pakistan says the Taliban are giving safe haven to in Afghanistan. For Pakistan, that's ground zero of their entire security problem. And this is where it gets really weird, and you can see it laid out perfectly here. On one hand, you've got cooperation. A key border crossing reopens after years. Trade is happening. But at the same time, there's total conflict. Gunfights on the border, diplomats getting yelled at, thousands of trucks just stuck. It's the ultimate paradox. They desperately need each other to survive economically, but they can't stop fighting. They're completely codependent.
And that leads us to the big, unanswered question. How long can this possibly last? You've got a divided Pakistan and a hardline Taliban regime. This whole balancing act just feels so fragile. So, can they keep walking this tightrope with conflict on one side and cooperation on the other? Or are we heading for a major head-on collision right on the Durand line? That's the question nobody seems to have an answer to.